Welcome back to Sports Betting Truth, and today we're going to talk about how my baseball model has done so far this year. Wearing my hat today because I haven't got my hair cut in 2 months because the idiots that run the state have decided to shut down barbershops, but fortunately I will get that fixed on Saturday when I'm out of the state. Moving on, today we're going to talk about my baseball model. We are about 3 weeks in, a little less than 3 weeks in, and I wanted to do a video kind of like highlighting what I've learned so far because it's been a learning experience. If you've followed me along, I've always said the biggest teacher in anything when it comes to sports betting is trial and error. Trial and error. You cannot progress until you have failed and learned from your mistakes. Now, I'm not saying I've failed so far, but there have been things that I've learned that you can't really predict or account for when you're building a model. You know, you're not going to know that these issues exist until you actually encounter them. And so there's been a lot of those so far. So I've learned a lot so far. You know, it's been a great learning experience. So I'd like to talk about kind of like what I've learned so far. So anyway, moving on. So here is my file that I call the Key Master. This is kind of where I track all my bets and everything so far. So far this year, there has been 17 days that I've tracked in my model, and my model has made 8,254 predictions. And out of those 8,254 predictions, let me add a filter here, my model has determined that 3,582 have had a value greater than 0. And expected value-wise, it has determined about the same number has had expected value greater than 0. So that's great. So how is it done overall out of those 17 days? Well, out of those 3,582 bets, it is 1,833, 1640, and 109 for plus 94.26 units. So 3,500 plus plays is, yes, considered long-term. So you can say at this point, yes, it is profitable so far. A 2.7% ROI. If you were to play every single game that my model said had a value greater than 0, you'd be up 94.26 units for a 2.7% ROI. I'm not going to complain. Actually, no, I think that's great because if you looked at my other models, specifically college basketball and college football, you would have noticed that this right here, this is what I call the keyless results, so no keys, was actually negative in my college basketball and college football models, and it was the keys that brought it over the top into profitable zones, right? But here, even without any keys, just everything, it's profitable. That's great. That's what you want because that means with keys, it's going to be even better. So yes, you can say it's profitable. So I cannot complain. I'm going to say my model is profitable at this point, and how do I phrase this the right way? Better than losing. This could be 0. This could be in the negative. I mean, it's better than losing, right? And so when you apply the keys is kind of like how you bring the ROI higher. So when you apply the keys retroactively to those past 17 days, you have an ROI of 17.5%. Now that's probably too optimistic. I put retroactive in parentheses here for a reason because when I say it's retroactive, I mean if you were to go back to those 17 days and apply these keys to the bets retroactively, this is what the results would be. That's probably too high. The answer is probably somewhere in the middle. Probably somewhere around 8% ROI going forward is what you're shooting for. And this is all lines offered. So like I pointed out, like all 5 underlines in a single game, you'd play all 5. While where these 2 columns where all 5 underlines, you'd only play the highest expected value that the model says to play. And so, honestly, it really isn't making much of a difference. All lines are to the best value lines. Both of them have an ROI of 2.7%. And then the key zone best value line a little bit higher than this one. So that means you want the best value lines ROI is higher than the all lines, which is what I've been doing. I've mainly been playing off of this so far. Now, I'm not up 174.2 units. I can tell you that. Remember, it's retroactive. I'm slightly up. Actually, I think I'm down now. But anyway, this is what I play off of, right? So this is kind of like the best case scenario. But then when you look at all the lines ROI, money line is what I built this model off of, right? I originally built this model to profit off money lines. That's kind of what you have in mind, and that's 10.9% ROI. That's good, right? Money line first 5 around the same, and then run lines started off kind of slow, but has really found its footing lately, 4% ROI. But here's where we start to run into trouble. First 5 run lines, it seems like I cannot hit those at all. All overs. There's a lot of overs last night, but overall all overs are unprofitable. And that's just really because the theory I've seen out there is just it's easier for pitchers to kind of get going than hitters, especially in a shortened season with hardly any spring training at all. So I get that. But unders, full game unders are profitable, but not as profitable they have been. I think overs are starting to come around. First 5 unders, not profitable. And then team total unders are profitable. The highest ROI of anything I have so far is first 5 unders, 13.9%. So that's kind of how things are doing when you break them out. And then I do the 14-day summary, because this is actually where I generate my keys. In all models, it's always a 14-day rolling average. Things are about the same, though. Still profitable money lines, still profitable unders, not profitable overs. I mean, not much difference. The main difference between the overall and 14 days, the run line ROI is 50% higher than the overall ROI, because that's kind of coming around. And the first 5 unders are also higher ROI over the last 14 days. But money lines, the bread and butter of the model, really what I want to focus on the most. As long as money lines are profitable, I'm happy. That's really what you're shooting for. The posted plays summary this is what I'm posting on my Twitter account. This is what I've been betting on all season, and I'm down, right? I started betting for real on day 1, so 2 days in there I didn't bet on. I'm basically even Steven so far at betting for real. Money lines and both first 5 and full games have been good, but I just haven't been able to find it on first 5 run lines, which has been a disaster, and first 5 totals, especially overs, not working for me. Team totals is good. So really, if I was only betting money lines, which is what I did last year, I would be fine. Like I said, I've never really been good at totals. Totals is something I'm kind of jumping into this year with this model, and mixed results. But money line, which I've always been good at, it's good. So now we're going to talk about the Conundrum, and I call this the PPS Conundrum. So the reason I decided to do a Monte Carlo model with this baseball model is because last year I ran a Monte Carlo model, nowhere near as robust or complex or thorough as this one. But last year in the month of July and August, I ran a Monte Carlo model to success, right? But it was nowhere near as robust. But I was successful with it. It was only for money lines, no totals, no first 5, nothing, just money lines. And it did well enough to where I was like, okay, I want to take that concept and expand on it. That's where this model came from. I ran it in July and August, so I already had a half season's worth of data and more to work with. I didn't have to do a player projection system or anything because I already had a big enough sample size to work off of. And so when I was building out this model, I was like, I probably shouldn't need to focus too much on a player projection system because, just enough to get me through the first couple of weeks, right? And then I'll have enough data. That's not the case. And here's why. The extremes. You have players like Charlie Blackmon that are batting 500. They're not going to keep that up. But if I were to phase out the PPS system after 2 weeks, his numbers would be way inflated. He's not going to be able to sustain that. So the main question I have, the conundrum, is how quickly do I phase out the player projection system, the preseason projections I create for the players? Now in college basketball and college football, I don't. I leave it in all season. So I'm like, okay, but at the same time, you want to leave the player projections in long enough because you need a mean to regress to. The rule of thumb for anything statistics is when in doubt, regress to the mean, right? You still need a mean to regress to, and every player's mean to regress to is going to be different. Mike Trout's mean is going to be different than a mean for like a brand new replacement level player. So the whole point of the PPS system wasn't so much to project a player's stats as much as it was to give a player's mean to regress to until we build up a sample size big enough to where I don't have to rely on it as much. But like I said, there's extremes, and if you phase it out too early, then the extremes are going to rule the day, and that can create a problem. Charlie Blackmon's one example, and I think another example is Dylan Bundy. He was terrible last year for the Orioles, but this year he's been one of the best pitchers in baseball for the Angels. But it's like, okay, if I were to phase out his mean too soon, then is he really going to be able to sustain this awesome pitching he's done so far in his first 3 or 4 games? I don't know. So you're like, okay, he might not be able to sustain that, but at the same time, maybe he's figured something out. Maybe the Angels pitching coaches have found something that has allowed him to turn his game around, right? So if you take too long to phase out the player projections, then you're not going to be able to capture players who have actually legitimately turned it around, legitimately figured things out. So it's like, okay, what's the middle ground? You can't phase it out too soon, but you can't wait too long to phase it out. So what's the middle ground? That's what I've been messing around with over the past week or so. It's like, okay, I don't know. And that's kind of the problem I've had. It's like, okay, how quickly do I do this? There's arguments to be had on both sides, right? I think, for example, like Nelson Cruz hasn't hit a home run at home yet this year, or at least when I was doing that experiment, he hadn't. And I was like, okay, if I phase it out too soon, he's going to have like a home run probability of 0 at home, and that's not realistic. But if I phase it out too long, maybe it won't capture the fact that he's not as lethal of a home run hitter anymore. You know, he's, 40 years old, so many things to ask. But I think time will tell what the best way to go is. But right now, in a normal 162-game season, I'd probably phase it out after, like, 300 to 400 at-bats, or, 200 batters faced for pitchers, But with a shortened season, it's a little bit different. And so the number I have right now is 125 at-bats. So after 125 at-bats, the PPS will phase out. Not completely, but for the most part it will. That might be too soon, that might be too long, but that's the number I'm rolling with right now. 125 at-bats and plate appearances, or 125 at-bats for batters and 125 batters faced for pitchers. After that, it'll pretty much be phased out. So that might be too soon, it might not be, but that's what I'm rolling with for the shortened season. If it were a longer season, I'd be able to afford to make it last longer, but you can't, because I just don't think my player projection system is robust enough and thorough enough to really be able to rely on that the entire season. I'm not saying I think the PPS that I have sucks, but it's not as robust as it probably should be to be able to rely on it the whole year. So anyway, moving on to the next part of this video, which is daily fantasy. Now, I posted a video this weekend about my daily fantasy experiences so far that were terrible, but I think I've turned it around over the past 5 days. So here is my daily fantasy log. So over the past 5 days, I have entered in, not counting the White Sox and Tigers that's going on right now, White Sox are up 3-1. So up until then, I have entered 189 DFS contests over the last 5 days. And this number right here, 59%, represents the average percentile lineup I had submitted in those contests. And I've cashed, so all the ones that are blue or green are the ones I cashed in, and all the ones with red text I did not. So I cashed in 111 out of 189. That's 58.7%. Cashing, you need to be 50%. So I have about a 8.7% ROI right now on daily fantasy over the past 5 days, which is awesome. And if you saw my video last week, you'll see that I had, you would have seen that I had like a bunch of different ways to calculate DFS. Well, there's 8 different lineup types I honed in on. So the X3, which is mean, 5, which is standard deviation -1, 6, which is standard deviation +1, and then the 5 quintiles, right? The quintiles, so 0 to 20, 20 to 40, 40 to 60, 60 to 80, and 80 to 100. So those are the 8 I have honed in on. And so here's how they have done. So number 3 has been the best. Number 3 and number 5, which are like the mean and the SD-1, have been the best for the showdown. So showdown, you only pick 6 players, so it's best to be a little bit more conservative, and that's what those lineups are. But for classic, where you pick 10 players, lineups 25 and 26 have been the best, right? Those are the more extremes. Those are the high upside guys. And so those have been the best. And so lineup 22, which is the 0 to 20% distribution, has been the worst by far. So that's pretty eye-opening. So really for Classic, I've been leaning more towards these. And for Showdown, I've been leaning more towards these. And overall, you could make a case for saying 26 has been best, 25 has been best, 23, and 3. Those have been the top 4. Going forward, I think I'll probably be leaning on those, but I really want to get the sample size up to 50 before I make any hard decisions. So right now we're at about 20. So I have about a week more to go in DFS before determining which of these 8 lineups I'll roll with going forward, but I can't complain. It looks like my approach has really paid off so far, at least in 5 days worth of work. So can't complain there. So that's kind of how I've turned things around for DFS. And so the question I've been asking over the past week or so is, it seems like every time I have a good DFS night, I have a bad betting night, and every time I have a good betting night, I have a bad DFS night. So it's like, okay, how come I can't put the two on the same page? Well, I think I figured it out, actually. So betting, let me pull up my bets for the day. So I've only run my model for 2 games so far, but for betting, for example, like I played the Tigers money line first 5. Even though my model only gave it a 40% chance, I play it. So for betting, you're playing percentages, right? So if your model gives a 10% chance of something happening and the odds only say 5%, you play it even though there's only a 10% chance of it happening. You still play it even though like the odds are low because you have value. So you make bets based on value, but DFS you're making bets based on the theoretical mean. And so whenever the theoretical mean happens, you succeed, right? In DFS at least, because the theoretical mean happened, you're making bets off the theoretical mean, and that's what. So if the status quo happens, you do well in DFS, at least according to most of my approaches. But in betting, you're looking for value. So if something that only has a 10% chance of happening happens and you win the bet, that 10% outlier is going to ruin your DFS because that 10% is not a part of the theoretical mean, right? So when the outliers happen in betting, you're going to profit because you're making bets based on value, but those outliers are not a part of the theoretical mean in DFS, so it's going to screw you over. So that makes sense, right? I hope I worded it enough for like that, but that might be the case going forward. Like, I might not be able to be on the same page every night, but hopefully I will be. But that's just one theory I have as to why that happened. But anyway, that's kind of the summary for my model over the first 2 weeks. Mixed results. I can't complain. Overall, the model's profitable, but you know, we could be doing better, and hopefully that will be the case as more games get in. But like I said, the PPS is a big conundrum, and another one of those things is, yes, I have more data to work off of as more games get in, but so do the odds makers as well, right? So it's always one of those conundrums. But you know, 2 weeks in, I'm not going to complain. Like I said, this number could be negative. That number could be negative, but it's not. And as long as that number is positive, I feel like I have a good foundation to work off of. So anyway, that's kind of the recap for my model over the first 17 days. Stay tuned to my Twitter account at WCLEISS if you want to see what games I'm on every day. But as far as actually anything deeper than that, I've had people ask me to publish every single game. I'm not going to do that. I want to protect my intellectual property, you know. I had people emailing me and stuff saying, hey, can you like post the results for every single game? I have a game of the day where I'll do that, but I'm not going to do that for every game. You know, I worked very hard on this model. I'm not going to give it all away for free. You know, that would be disrespecting my work. So game of the day is where you'll be able to see the internals of of a single game. But like I said, if I'm not posting it to my Twitter account, I'm not betting it. So you're not missing out on anything. Anyway, that wraps it up for this video. Stay tuned for more baseball information right here. Sports Betting Truth signing off.